All right, and that story by our reporter Trix Ngado brings us to a two-poll question. At this hour, we ask you, do you think there is political goodwill by African governments to empower the youth? Do you think there's political goodwill by African governments to empower the youth? Kindly participate on that poll and tell us why you polled the way you have. Tweet us at KTN News, or you can tweet me at Akisa Wandera. The hashtag is Worldview for easier tracking of your responses online, and I'll definitely be sampling a number of your views just before the end of the program at the top of the hour. All right, and before we get to that discussion on the youth and that particular session ongoing in Addis Ababa today and tomorrow, and the expectations on what will come out of that, let's just take a look at a few facts on the youth agenda in the continent. We'll be taking a look at them on our Super Bowl here. So the theme this year, in the AU summit, is harnessing the demographic dividend through investments in youth. And that has been highlighted in that story by our reporter Trix Ngado. So when we say youth, that entails anyone from the age of 15 to 24, constituting more than 20% of Africa's population in 2050. Let's take a look at how the constitution will look like in 2050. According to research, 18.6% of the population in Central Africa, the youth will constitute 18.6%. In East Africa, the youth will constitute 18.5%. In West Africa, 18.8%. In South Africa, 15.6%. And in North Africa, 13.9%. Numbers are not too far off from each other. And about 36.8% of Africa's workforce are youth. Let's take a look at the second board and see the tools to effectively engage the youth by the AU. This is in accordance with that particular summit once again. So among the points we have here is a decade plan of action for youth empowerment and development, the AU Youth Volunteer Corps program, as well as the African Youth Day, first marked on 1st of November 2010. These are the things that will be under discussion in the 29th ordinary session of the AU summit, currently ongoing at Addis Ababa, starts today and tomorrow. Let's take a look at the three major pillars in that particular decade action plan for youth empowerment since May 2011. So the pillars are ensuring rights-based approach to youth development, consolidated investment targeting youth socio-economic empowerment, as well as mainstreaming youth perspective in the efforts to achieve broad development goals. And we will be delving deeper into this, see since 2011 whether this has been achieved, whether we are on the right track as a continent to achieving these three pillars that are the action plan for youth empowerment for a whole decade. So some of the objectives for the AU Youth Volunteer Corps program are engaging Africa's youth in the continent's development through meaningful youth participation by providing for the continent, as well as providing opportunities for young Africans to serve. And when it comes to opportunity, we also have a representative of young people, and would love to hear her thoughts on the kind of opportunities that are provided for the youth in the African continent. But providing opportunities is one thing. Are they taking them? This is what this discussion will be all about. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us here. Very good morning to you.
Good morning. Morning.
All right, so in studio, to articulate these issues, I am joined by Mike Eldon, my immediate right. He is the chairman of the KCA University, as well as an economic and development expert. Thank you for coming in. We have Imali Ngusale, the young person's voice on the show. We'll be hearing some of the thoughts she has about the youth agenda in the African continent. We're also joined by Peter Nyakwara. He is the Director of Technical Services at the National Council for Population and Development in the country. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you so much. And finally, we have Dr. Elias Zulu. He is the Executive Director in charge of Research and Policy at the African Institute for Development Policy. Thank you very much for coming in. All right, I think I will start with a young person. Do you think from the question we are asking our viewers, do you think there is political goodwill from African governments to empower the youth?
I'm not really sure, because it sounds like it's a discussion that has been going on for quite some time, since the 90s, 2000, and right now. It's like the youth are always the leaders for tomorrow. But now the big question is this tomorrow ever coming? Right now, I was also looking at the pillars that are going to be focused. They seem a bit abstract. And when it comes to the voice of the youth, the big question is, why would you decide about the future of young people and not ask them where they want to be?
So you feel like the governments are out of touch with the needs of the youth?
I feel to some extent they're out of touch, because they kind of ask them, what do you want, instead of engaging them in a discussion and trying to find solutions together with the youth.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you agree? Do you agree, Doctor?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely critical that youth should be at the table and should be centrally involved when decisions are being made. But I think going back to your original question about whether governments actually this political commitment, I think for me, the fact that the African Union has actually made this year's theme harnessing the demographic dividend through investments in youth is a good start. It shows that the political leadership of the continent has come to the realization that we can't really achieve the long-term development goals. You know, the African Union has Agenda 2063. And in Agenda 2063, one of the specific aims there is to unleash the potential of youth. Because you look at the statistics you are showing there, of course you were focusing on the age group 15 to 24. But I think you look at many constitutions in Africa,
you
youth,
go to 35,
35 and 30. And when you look at Africa as a whole, out of every 10 people, 7 are actually people below age 30, 70%. And if your population, our population, is dominated by young people, you can't really achieve those long-term development goals. We can't achieve Vision 2030 if our strategies are not focusing on youth. So, to the extent that our governments are talking about it at the African Union, this is the central focus of the debate this year. It shows that there is commitment to do something. But what needs to be done to actually get the programs to change the skills of young people so that they play this role? I think we are very, very far from getting to that stage.
Mike, do you agree that this particular session is a step towards the right direction because it focuses on the youth?
Definitely. I think this whole concept of what the demographic dividend is or can be if it's actualized, and all that has to be put in place to get from the necessary to the sufficient to make it happen, to have that get continental-wide airing and beyond is absolutely excellent. I was seeing the other day, there are 21 African presidents over the age of 70. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily.
Is it a good thing?
The question is, how are they getting input on the needs of youth and leading practical solutions on how to reach for this demographic dividend? I guess in all countries, you'd have to be asleep not to be aware that there is this youth bulge. And we've all seen what happened in the African Spring, which was largely led as a result of unemployed youth. So people know what the problem is. I think the question is, how skilled are they at getting their act together in coming up with all these policies that we'll be talking about here to make this a dividend rather than the opposite? How do older people engage with younger people? At KCA University, you mentioned I'm the chairman of the council there. We have developed a relationship with the student council that there is constructive engagement. Now, for instance, in too many universities, it's the opposite. It's the rebellious youth and the stern parents of faculty and administration. So these are skills needed both among older people and younger people so that we can talk together just as human beings. And whether we're older, young, or men or women, or more or less educated, we come together to see what's good for society as a whole and us within it.
How is that working out for the young people at KCA?
At KCA, it's working out well. Now, you may say that those who come to a business school and a technology school like KCA are less likely to be radical, angry, anti-establishment characters. They select themselves to come into a more sober and mature environment. But for whatever reason, we have that, and the Vice-Chancellor and his team have nurtured that atmosphere among the students generally, among the faculty on how to engage with the students. So these are skills in themselves, irrespective of age.
Okay. Let me come to you, Nyakwara. You're from the National Council for Population in this country. Just take us through the numbers. We even understand that the youth will be the majority who will be voting in this particular election.
Thanks. It is true. When you look at our population structure, you find that because of past high fertility, which has created a momentum, and now our population structure has a very high percentage of young people. In fact, 43% of our population is below age 15. When you move it forward, 24, you find the percentage increases until when you move to what Suru was mentioning, that there is a problem in definition who is a youth. Our constitution defines a youth somebody who is 18 to 34. When you move the population to 34, you find it's going up to almost 80% of the population, which is a challenge. How do we respond to these high numbers? Because they have got needs in education, health, employment, and we have to involve them. The starting point is how the government committed to the youth issues in the country. The starting point is our constitution. If you look at our constitution, there are several articles which address the needs of the youth. The question is, how do we translate those articles in the constitution into actual realization of the youth needs? One of the things we have done is the issue of understanding what are the youth issues in order to gain from the demographic dividend. In 2015, the National Council for Population Development, in cooperation with various stakeholders in the health sector, the private sector, the youth organization, we did a national survey on national address center and the youth issues. And we covered all the 47 counties where we had structured interviews with the stakeholders and the youth. The youth told us what their issues are and how they want their issues to be addressed.
Well, what were these issues?
One of the key issues which came across all the counties is the issue of their reproductive health, access to information and services, which is impacting them. The issue of HIV/AIDS, and you have seen the results coming out, is a key issue. For us to attain the demographic dividend, we must address the issue of reproductive needs of young people. The demographic health survey indicated the serious challenge our young people face, especially the issue of teenage pregnancy, where you find almost 18% of our young people have had a child. Somebody who is below 18 years, that person is supposed to be in school, is supposed to be in college, is joining college. But due to high teenage pregnancies, early marriages, in fact, it's child marriages, they are not in school, they are not getting skill. You see, this one already compromises their potentials, their growth. The other issue which came up from that survey, which will also impact enhancing the demographic dividend, is the issue of drug, alcohol, and drug abuse. Across the counties, it's a real problem which as readers, as stakeholders, we must address if we have to meet the needs of young people. Then the other issue which came up also was the issue of lack of information, labor market information. Opportunities are there, young people who finish their college, but you have to access that information is a challenge. That's where they are also giving a solution to enhance the issue of use of information technology, those centers where they can get information.
Okay. So, Dr. Zulu, from
Yes.
these problems that he says from teenage pregnancies, a very high number we have there of about 18%, teenage pregnancies, reproductive health, lack of information, as he says, HIV and AIDS, and most importantly, access to information and services. We have so many policies that are on paper and so many promises that are on paper and look good on paper, but they're not working. And she mentioned it earlier on. What are the policies that should be in place, and they should walk the talk on them, that will help in empowering the youth in African countries?
I think the point really is that this, as Mr. Nyakwara said, I think we pretty much know what the problems are. And I think the statistics show a lot of young people are getting pregnant, and it's because they don't have access to services. And this is a controversial issue because, you know, when you come to sexuality of young people, starting with parents, you know, teachers, religious leaders, community leaders, everybody has a point of view there, and a lot of people feel uncomfortable about making, you know, services available to young people. A lot of people tend to argue that, oh, if you teach young people about sexuality or about sex and how they protect themselves, it actually encourages them to indulge in sexual activities. But evidence does show that if you really provide information at the age-appropriate information, even starting from primary school, secondary school, even at the university level, and back that up by services that are readily available to the young people who have, if you call it that, crossed the line, are indulging in sex, to make sure that they are protected, that actually these services do work. So in Kenya, as in many other African countries, that debate, the controversies surrounding that debate is one of the key factors that is preventing young people from accessing services. I think that as parents, as government officials, what we need to recognize is that young people are increasingly having sex earlier than before. You look at, if you look at age from, say, 15, 16, 18, you see that by age 18, over 75, 80% of young people are sexually active. Now, if we are still going to be debating about whether to provide services that will protect them or not, then we run the risk of actually losing the opportunity to protect young people. So the policies are there. I think what needs to happen is really for all stakeholders to come together and make sure that the services, the information and services that young people need, you know, age appropriate, because you also don't want to start teaching 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds about things that they are not able to handle. But you have to start teaching people from even as young as 10, so that when that time when, you know, nobody is going to be there, the parent is not going to be there when they have that sexual, you know, experience, that they are ready to protect themselves and maybe even demand protection and so on.
So how do we go about this?
I think that the point has to be to walk the talk. I think that Kenya actually is one of the countries that has one of the most extensive sexual and reproductive health services. Young people, you look at the statistics, actually teenage pregnancies in Kenya over the last sort of a decade or so have actually not changed. Yet in the whole population, birth rates have come down. Now an average number of children per woman is 3.9, but among young people, there's hardly any change, which means the programming that is happening on young people is not working well. And the point has to be, how do we reach them? I think the point about having youth-friendly services, because most of the contraceptives or protection that they need, either they have to buy it, if they have to go to government clinics, sometimes health workers have prejudices, and they don't want to serve young people because, in their view, young people are not supposed to indulge in sex. So I think it has to be a collective responsibility, making sure that we reach young people. Youth-friendly services tend to work well, making sure that intensive information is given to them. I think that's even very critical, because then they can look for the services themselves when they need them.
Okay, Emali, I would like you to just comment on what he says.
Yeah, thank you. In as much as, yes, we're focusing on the bigger picture, indeed, a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. And right now, if you're looking at the kind of population or rather human capital that will need to achieve Vision 2030, we need to make sure that the youth right now are not just informed in as far as how best they can contribute to the economy, but they also need to be informed on how best they can be healthy so that they can contribute into the economy. I agree with NCPD that, yes, fertility rates have dropped. Yes, there are so many things, there are so many changes that have been done. But what can be done to sustain that? The story, the narrative behind a teenage pregnancy, it's not just in Kenya, it's also in Uganda and Tanzania. So it means that there's something wrong because the reverberation of teenage pregnancy means that young girls are not able to finish school, and we are going to have the same problems again because we're going to have empowerment programs running up to 2030 and even beyond, because young women will always not have sufficient opportunities like men, because young girls, whenever they get pregnant, it's them that suffer. The men still continue with school. So I think it's not a question of just having policies, but it's also a question of how best are the policies implemented? Are people having... There's the question of access to information, but the question is, are they having the right kind of information? In as far as youth-friendly services are concerned, we're supposed to have youth-friendly services across all counties, but that is not the case to date. I've had the rare privilege of working in Busia. You find young girls as young as 12 years old engaging in this activity because they don't have somebody to support their education. They don't have somebody to support not just the education, their welfare as well. Because it's not just education in as far as I can read and write, but I can think beyond the classroom walls. And because of that, many truck drivers take advantage of these girls, and this has been recurring. And the end game is not just teenage pregnancies, also like NCPD says, high rate of HIV prevalence, but also STIs, some of which they could be prevented, but they are not.
All right.
Yes.
From health, let's talk about investing in the youth. Are you satisfied with the programs that are there that should help the youth, especially when it comes to their contribution in a country's economy?
That's a big one, huh?
Yes, definitely.
Let me start by building on what's been said here.
Definitely.
About education and information in the area of sexual and reproductive health. This is a component in the broader education of a young person as they prepare for a healthy, sustainable, self-reliant life. And in this context, of course, there's been a lot of attention paid in the last few months to the new curriculum framework. I really haven't come across anyone who doesn't think it's a good framework. I love it. I think it's terrific. And this whole transformation from rote learning, an emphasis on content, to an emphasis on skills and attitudes and competence is exactly what's needed, including in this area, including and not least in this area, because we're talking about attitudes and how to be responsible and reliable and how to say no to what you should be saying no to. And then more broadly, how do you do personal financial management? How do you interact with people, the life skills, so much of that. I've been involved with the development of the values-based education, which is a particular component in this new curriculum framework. And let me tell you, if this thing even works half well, it's going to revolutionize how people come into the world of work in this country. And it will influence everything from fertility rates to reduction in unemployment to personal growth, to you name it. We're about to embark on a number of years within which the teaching community will be transformed, will be empowered. My sense is that they're up for it, that they're looking forward to it. Not 100%, but despite a traditionally conservative trade union movement, whether here or in any other country, I think a normal, healthy teacher would be looking forward to delivering more value to the young people of tomorrow. So the kind of investment in the new curriculum framework is good. And part of that also, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, is as you move towards the tertiary level, we've had this excessive emphasis in recent years on universities, and everyone has to have a degree, and it's just gone haywire.
Yeah.
To one way say, hey, now wait a minute, we don't need everyone to be a university graduate. Let's bring in a bigger emphasis on technical and vocational training where there's such a shortage here as in many other countries. In the Queen's speech in the British Parliament just a week or two ago, the government had the Queen say, we are going to do more technical and vocational training. Hillary Clinton promoted it greatly in her campaign. Trump has been talking about it. It's a global opportunity.
It is something we should embrace.
It's a global challenge. We have embraced it. We've got a terrific department that's emerging in the Ministry of Education for it, with a terrific Principal Secretary, Dina Mwinzi, and I'm expecting great things from how we are moving forward with technical and vocational education to complement the degree, more academic stuff, which itself is coming out of the ivory tower.
All right.
Just a quick one from what Mark said is very key. The issue of attitude and investment. You remember early this year or late last year, a survey was done, and what came up was very revealing on the issue of youth and attitude about governance and accountability, where they were saying they don't regard how they get the money, but they want to be rich. You see, that's wrong attitude already. And it's also going to affect our pillar on accountability and governance, which is a key component on the demographic dividend. Another question you posed, and it is good I respond to it, was the issue of investment. Kenya will do investment planning through the medium-term plan for Vision 2030. We are in the process of now finalizing medium-term 3 and the county integrated development plan 2. What we have done as a council in consultation with other sectors is to mainstream youth issues in all the sectors, both at national, various sectors, and also at the country level. So if we can be able to ensure that in all the sectors, even if it's agriculture, ICT, the youth issues are mainstreamed and are budgeted, then we can be able to respond to the needs of the youth.
All right.
The issue is prioritizing the youth issues.
Okay.
That's what we are doing.
That would be very good for our last word. Unfortunately, I'm told we don't have much time left, but thank you very much for coming in. Mike Eldon is the chairman of KCA, an economist and development expert. Imali Ngusale is representing the youth here. We have Dr. Elias Zulu, who is the Executive Director in charge of Research and Policy at the African Institute of Development, and as well as Peter Nyakwara. He's the Director of Technical Services at the National Council for Population and Development. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us here on Worldview for this very enlightening conversation. But on Twitter, we'd still like to engage with you. We ask you, do you think African governments have the goodwill to empower the youth? Do you think African governments have the goodwill to empower the youth? Tweet us at KTN News, at Akisa Wandera. The hashtag is Worldview. I'll definitely be taking a look at a number of your views just before the end of the program. But for now, let's take a short break. Don't go too far. We still